Here we have an interesting Kia. The customer put the sign on. It's a hybrid. It burns gas and oil because it burns oil. They bought it brand new. It's only got 17,000 miles on it, and it started burning oil right around when it had 15,000 miles on it. Now, it didn't originally, so that kind of tells you, something is amiss here. Now, Kia knows they have problems. This one actually had a recall, and they went through the BS process of Kia where they said, no, we're not going to replace the engine or fix it, even though it's burning oil. You know how that goes with these companies. They were even told by mechanics at the place that, well, unless you just drive until the engine blows up, they'll put another engine in then, but they're not going to fix it if it's burning oil. Now, obviously, it shows they're not making them correct. Because the first 15,000 miles, it didn't burn any oil. Now it is, right? Obviously, something's wearing out. They're not going to admit to any of this stuff because, they don't want to replace all these engines. Kia's had nothing but engine problems for decades. They had those ones that were made in the United States where the engines were blowing up and they blamed it on a bad machine that didn't make the engines right, and then metal was going inside and blowing them up. These aren't particularly blowing up if you keep adding oil, but they are burning oil. Now take my 94 Celica, okay? It burns half a quart of oil every 3,000 miles. I changed it then, so I really don't care. Now, why does it burn oil? It burns oil because it's got 240,000 miles on it. Things are worn, but really, that's a lot of miles. This baby's only got 17,000 now, and it started burning oil when it had 15,000. Now, Kia says through their corporate baloney line, well, if it takes 1,000 miles or more to burn 1 quart of oil, that's normal and not going to do anything about it whatsoever. Now, granted, this car is only burning half a quart of oil about every 1,000 miles. But still, it's a brand new car practically. 17,000 miles, it started burning oil at 15,000 miles. And here's the funny thing. According to Kia, you're only supposed to change the oil every 7,500 miles. He changes the oil and drives it. It doesn't really burn any oil until it gets about 4,000 miles or so on it, then it starts burning oil. You're going against their own rules. I just change the oil every 4,000 miles. What's happening is, as the oil gets older, it gets degraded and it breaks down some. And this is a very high-tech engine. See, it's got ignition coils on the top, got a timing chain on it, and it's not a particularly tiny engine. It's a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. That's definitely big enough. It's not like those crappy little 1-liter 3-cylinder engines. They all end up burning oil because they strain too much. Now, if it's turbocharged, you have all that extra air rammed in the engine, which increases the pressure inside the combustion chamber, which does wear them out. And if you've ever owned a turbocharged car that got old, you'll notice it probably starts burning oil as it ages, especially when you rev it to the higher RPMs. But this is a normally aspirated 4-cylinder 2-liter engine. It shouldn't have any problems burning oil at all. They obviously do not make the things correctly. Now, just for kicks, we'll pull out the spark plugs and look at them, see what kind of shape they're in, see how much oil it's actually burning. But before I take out the spark plugs, here's the rest of the story. So the owner tells me they did take it to the dealer, and it was right at 7,500 miles for an oil change. And the guy there was a nice mechanic. He said, well, we won't change the oil now. We'll let you do the oil test because that'll have a better chance of burning oil, and they'll fix your engine. So they seal the engine and they let him drive 1,000 miles. So he comes back after 1,000 miles, right? And the guy told him, well, you should check your oil once in a while. You don't blow up your engine. So they did. Well, when he came in, they said, well, one, your test is going to be invalid because you broke the seal on the oil dip stick. Now, to me, that's absurd because so what if he broke the seal on the oil dip? That's just for checking the oil, right? He didn't empty any out, right? Well, regardless, the guy said it wouldn't even matter because it had burnt oil, but in that 1,000 miles, it had only burned half a quart of oil. And as I said earlier, Kia says quart of oil every 1,000 miles or a quart of oil every 1,500 miles or whatever is normal and they're not going to fix it anyways. And then the guy says, well, I'll change the oil for 60 bucks. We're not going to give you another car. And then we can perform the test again if you want, but we got to keep the car overnight. We're not going to give you a loaner car. So they thought and said, okay, now will you put this in writing for us? The guy says, no, I'm not going to put it in writing. And that's something I warn people about. always get it in writing. I've had so many people. I had a guy once, I said, the spark plugs have been changed on your car to hide something. They're brand new. And he just had the car serviced at the dealer. That was the only guy who worked on it, right? But I looked at his bill, and it was nothing about spark plugs on the bill. They didn't want to fix some warranty work, and the bill said what he had done. It was like a $900 bill, but there wasn't a mention of spark plugs on it. They're brand new spark plugs. So I said, well, somebody did, and he said, well, I didn't, and they're the only ones that worked on it. So he goes back to him, and he says, well, I noticed there's new spark plugs on the car, but it's not on the bill. And you know the baloney they gave him? They said, well, sir, we changed your spark plugs free as a service, so we didn't put it on the bill. What a line of baloney. They just flat out lied to him. So anytime you go in, you gotta get it in writing, especially if it's a warranty thing. I've had people over the years, they'll have a noise. They've still got like 2,000 miles left on their original car warranty. The engine's making a noise. When you take it to the dealer, have it written down. Customer complains of this noise. And then they say, we didn't find anything, whatever. Just don't say, oh, well, we didn't find anything. Here's your car back. You don't get a receipt. You gotta get a receipt. Because then if the engine blows up after the warranty's over, you got paperwork to say, look, it was making a noise. They couldn't figure out what it was. Now the engine's gone. You're going to fix my engine. You got to get a paper trail with these people because they're bureaucrats. They don't care. But in this case, they wouldn't have done anything anyways because it doesn't burn a quart or more of oil every 1,000 miles. So we'll take out the spark plugs. See how bad it actually is. We'll take one out. Look at it. Get the ignition coil off. Then we'll pull the spark plug out. Knock out the spark plug. Now, you can see it's not outrageous. It's got some spotty burning oil. It's nothing outrageous, but it is burning some oil. But we're gonna have to check them out, see if any are worse than the others. Not only can you see little spots on it, but look, oil. Shouldn't be oil on them. Check them all. And here comes the number 2. They got long threads on these things. And it's hot because he drove all the way from Arkansas. And you can see it's a little bit less. And when I squeeze the top, it's not particularly oily like the other one was. Meaning that the number 1 cylinder's more worn than the number 2. Now here's number 3. It's still got this little spotty burning stuff, but it's totally dry. There's no oil at all on the edge, so that's even in better shape. Now we'll do the last one, number 4. And we'll see what it looks like. There's oil on the front one and the back one. Obviously, the ends of the engine are wearing more than the middle, which is typical on an old worn out engine because you've got all the lubrication and coolant that cools the middle of the engine best, but the exterior parts of the engine, the front and the back, they're the ones that often suffer from some lack of lubrication, some lack of cooling, because they're on the edge. Just like if you remember the old Volkswagen Beetles with air-cooled engines, the number 3 cylinder would always burn out first because it had less airflow. Being an air-cooled engine, that cylinder didn't get enough air, and it was always the first one to burn up. On a water-cooled engine, cylinders that don't get as much cooling on the edge will generally wear faster than the ones in the middle. And of course, the dirtier the oil gets, then it will start leaking and or burning it more as it gets dirty. I mean, maybe after this vehicle, Kia will do something, but from my experience, they really don't give a rat's behind about their customers. But if you do own one of these like this, take my advice. Change the oil every 5,000 miles with full synthetic oil, and maybe it won't burn any oil. They tell you, well, you only need to change it to 7,500, but it's normal that they're gonna burn some oil while you're doing that. The logic of these companies is just beyond me. I got the plugs back in. I'll put the stupid beauty cover on. I know, doesn't make it look that beautiful. I think it's a stupid idea, but that's engineering for you. Other than the oil burning, the wife's real happy with it because it gets 38 miles a gallon. The husband, not so much because it's the first CVT he has and he hates the way it slouches up and down. Because of course, this doesn't have a launch gear like the Hondas and Toyotas do. So they are kind of wonky when they're accelerating up and down. We'll take it for a spin, I'll show you. Get out the key, at least it has a real key. I like that. Give them a plus for that. Starts right up. I mean, it's only got 17,286 miles on it. You can see it's not bad. Doesn't have the side pictures and stuff, but I mean, this is an economy car. And I gotta say, it idles smooth, doesn't shake at all. And you're relatively high up in the air. You can see pretty far, but you can see it doesn't have the acceleration of a Honda or Toyota with the launch gear. It's a relatively responsive car. When you're taking the corners, you feel under control. It's not as tight as other cars, but it's not particularly sloppy either. Got a decent wheelbase that it corners quite well. You don't feel insecure. I mean, the brakes are really responsive. All their stuff in the back fell forward when I slammed the brakes on. They work perfectly fine. They didn't slip either. ABS works. Take it to our little drag strip and see what it does. Here we go. We're headed to the drag strip and there's nobody behind us, so we can come to a stop. There's the line. And let's see what this thing can do. Here we go. We'll floor it. That was the ABS slipping because it's wet. And you noticed it turned itself off. Now, it does make a lot of noise. It accelerates okay. But you can see from the auto stop to save gas, when it started, there was quite a bit of hesitation when it restarted. The other day, I was checking out that Ford Bronco. And the Ford Bronco had no hesitation when it shut itself off to save gas. And then when I stepped on the gas, it was a very smooth transition. This has a pretty rough transition. You can clunk it when you stepped on it. It took a while to hesitate and then take off because it had shut it off to conserve gas. Now the wife in this case doesn't have a lead foot, but the husband does. And he doesn't particularly like the CVT, but she likes 38 miles a gallon. We'll do a little acceleration. I'll see what it does. Makes a lot of noise. It does accelerate. It's not horrible. Like I say, it's nothing like the Honda and Toyota with launch gears, and nothing like a regular, say, 6 or 7 speed automatic transmission that has gears that it can shift up and down, get a lot more acceleration. It handles pretty good in the twisties, you know. It's kind of a zippy little car. I would just be royally pissed if I had a car that had 17,000 miles on it that was burning oil. Because that's right now. With 17,000 miles on the clock. Imagine what it's going to do if it makes it to 100,000 miles. It's either going to burn a whole bunch more oil or the engine's going to blow up. But the overall design of the car, hey, check it out. Got windows everywhere. The driver's got a very good view for traffic. You're not going to miss anything. There's no blind spots. It's pretty well designed from that standpoint. It's just that the stupid thing burns oil. And unlike the early Kia Souls that had those giant hamsters or whatever they were selling them, these aren't bizarre looking cars. They look kind of nice. They have their own style. It's just that there it is. It's a hybrid. It burns gas and oil. And to the way that Kia dealerships mistreat their own customers. I've seen it here now. I've seen it in Arkansas. I've seen it back in Houston. I would never buy a Kia. And I wouldn't advise anyone else to either. It's your money, you can do whatever you want with it, but heed my warning like smart people do. I have so many people come here and they say, Scotty, we should have listened to your advice. We will next time. Well, don't make it a next time. Listen to me now. Here we have a Jeep. It didn't start on, and we played with relays, and then it started up. But I think it was more coincidence because he did the starter relay, and it was cranky. There's obviously something going on here. It's got the codes for running too lean on both banks. First, we'll look under the hood. Ignore the rattling plastic. No, they can run lean for lots of reasons. Common is a vacuum leak somewhere where it's sucking air. So we'll make sure everything's on tight, which it is. Don't see any hoses that have fallen off. I don't particularly hear any vacuum leaks. There's nothing obvious. So we're gonna have to look at the data, get on my big computer and analyze everything. You could have a weak fuel pump. First, we want to see what the actual codes are. Turn on the old scan tool and start analyzing. I like it in here because it's 16 degrees outside and it's nice and warm inside. Now, even though this thing has 145,000 miles on it, the heat still works good. Intelligent diagnosis. And the magic wheel spins. Oh, knows it's an 07 Jeep Grand Cherokee. Flex fuel, it's a relatively complicated vehicle now. It can run on all kinds of different fuel. And in the case of this vehicle, I believe it is a fuel problem. Cars often will run lean because they're sucking too much air. But if the fuel pump isn't pumping enough fuel, they'll also run lean. And this is a very complex system on it because it's a flex fuel. Now you can see there's a bunch of reds. We're talking about running problems. You care about the radio, crap like that. What we're looking at is the main computer. You can see the fuel system is lean on both bank 1 and bank 2. So both banks are running lean. That generally means it's not a vacuum leak, because if it's a vacuum leak, one side is going to be leaner than the other. It's got to be something that affects the whole system, not a leak on one side of the intake or the other. Fuel pressure comes to mind to me. Often fuel pressure is low. This is a flex fuel. They have very complex systems that run by the fuel pump, how much pressure it puts out, what the computer tells it to do. In this case, you actually want to pray that it is the fuel pump and not the computer system that runs it, because on a flex fuel, that's really complex. Look at the freeze frame. It happened when it was 203 degrees, but the battery voltage was only 9 volts. Interesting. And as we look further, it was adding 6% long-term on bank 1, but it's subtracting fuel on bank 2. Now this is making things really complex. You got opposite things going on. Now we're looking at another freeze frame, and still the battery voltage is 10.38. That is way too low. And we'll try another freeze frame. There's a lot of freeze frames on this. We're gonna check them all. Again, the battery voltage is too low. In this case, it was adding 27% on bank 1 and 30% on bank 2. That makes more sense. The fact that the other freeze frame was radically different is telling me something seems to be an electronic failure. We got low battery voltage. Once you get low battery voltage, all kinds of crazy crap can happen. Believe me, these cars are so complex. If they don't have full voltage, they'll do things that you couldn't imagine. Let's look at the last freeze frame data here. We're going to check them all. And in this one, the battery voltage is 10.07 volts. That's way too low too. We have the short-term fuel trim on both banks exactly the same. It's adding 26.55% at 30 miles an hour. So since it's showing bad battery voltage when it tripped, let's test the battery first. Put the positive on positive. You just put the negative on the negative and the positive on the positive, and we'll test it. 12 volts. Battery capacity. Battery type, it's a standard battery. Called cranking. Now we got to set it. At 0, it's 790. And at 32, it's 970. We got to know the temperature outside. Well, it's about 15 now, so we'll guess like 820. So we'll set this at 820 and we'll start it. Well, the battery's great. It's 827. State of charge is 100%. State of health is 100%. So that's good. The charging system. Turn on all loads and speed up to 2,000 RPM. Now we'll turn everything off and we'll rev it up. We find out the battery's 100%. The alternator's good. Passed the ripple test. As you saw, it only had 10.7 volts when it tripped the code. So, what do we have here? Well, something that's very typical with Jeeps. It has a wiring problem somewhere where it's losing voltage between the battery and the rest of the car. It was running, it was going 30 miles an hour according to the data, so the voltage should have been 14 something volts and it was 10. So somewhere there's an electrical short on this thing. Typical for Jeep products. The owner's given me a great clue. When it didn't start, he went to the totally integrated power module here. He whacked it, then it started. Well, this is going to save us a lot of time. It's a typical failure on all these Jeep products. There's many parts integrated in there. That's why it's called totally integrated power management, right? When it's integrated like that, you got to replace the whole thing. The totally integrated power module on this thing is over $600, and it has to be reconfigured for the vehicle using a fancy machine like I have. Some guys will try rebuilt one. I've had very bad experience with them. They'll try used ones, ditto. It's a design flaw of these stupid Jeeps. It's just an expensive monstrosity. And of course, it's also a royal pain in the butt to be absolutely sure that's bad, because it is a module. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And what happens is the insides of them just short out. And that's why it was only getting 10 point something volts. That also controls how much electricity the alternator's putting out. Everything today is run by computers, and we're just lucky that it gave me that data that showed when that code tripped, it had way too low voltage. And when it does that, the actual data you get from the sensors is meaningless. Because otherwise, well, not including when it didn't start, when you're driving it like now, get on a highway, run 65 fine, no problems at all. If this baby was running that lean, that it had to add 25% fuel, it'd be running like crap on the highway. And it isn't. Since the totally integrated power module is screwing up now and then, when it does, there's no saying what a computer will do. As you saw in that one time, it was adding fuel on one bank and it was subtracting 50% on the other bank, which makes no sense at all. Well, it actually wasn't doing that probably at all. It was just, that's the weird data the computer was reading, since the stupid sensors have really weak power. They only use 5-volt reference signal, and they only use milliamps. So if the power from the battery gets to be too weak, you'll get observed data, which is what this one is doing. From a diagnostic standpoint, hey, it was great that he told me when he beat on that, then it did start, because otherwise we would have to go through the entire electrical system of the car, checking every stinking wire and every stinking sensor. And since this is a flex fuel vehicle, it's got more sensors than normal cars have, and any single one of them can short out. And if it shorts out, it's going to make the computer get weird data. It has nothing to do with the engine itself actually running lead. Those are ghost codes. It's just tripping those codes because the computer's confused by the data that it's getting. That shuts the case on this Jeep. It's a very common problem. These totally integrated power modules on it. Now, this thing runs perfectly fine otherwise, just once in a while it acts up. And the interesting thing is, it's been cold lately, and that's when it started doing this crap. He might find in the summer it won't do it at all because it's warmer outside. I once had a Ford like that. Then in the winter it would act up once in a while, but heck, I was living in Houston, Texas, right? So it's never that cold for very long, and I got a bunch of cars anyways. But in the summer, the thing never acted up, and I drove it 5 years that way. And I sold it to a guy for $200, and then he sold it to a guy for $500 because it was the summer and it was still running good. So, absolutely have to have it. You don't have much money? What the heck? Go to a junkyard, try a used one. It's a gamble, but the used one's going to be by itself. They'll hand it to you. Get a flashlight, look around. Look on the bottom side. See if you see any burnt parts. If you see burnt wiring or smell burnt wiring, then don't say, no, this one's no good, I want another one. Or if you want to go halfway, they do make remanufactured ones. They got to guarantee them. So for a lot of people, that's a better deal. They'll go to AutoZone, O'Reilly, or someplace, get a remanufactured one, and it's got a guarantee. It doesn't work, they got to give you your money back. So that's another route that you can take. This one is just going to keep going and see how long it lasts. And if in the summer it doesn't, drive it all summer. Who cares? He's got another car. He can drive that in the winter and drive this one in the summer if he doesn't want to spend that kind of money to put a new assembly in. They bought this thing new 3 years ago, and they paid about $21,000. It's got 45,000 miles on it, and they've been happy with it except for one thing. The transmission sometimes shifts a little bit weird. And it's pretty much done so since it had 5,000 miles on it. He's taking it back, and supposedly Hyundai has replaced the transmission 3 times, which I kind of doubt. I don't trust those guys as far as you can throw them. It's got a minor shifting problem with them. It often does happen with these. And Hyundai's not a company that's like Lexus, Acura, or even Toyota and Honda. They don't treat their customers all that well. He admits that he was really manhandled by a dealership that didn't treat him right at all. And considering that they told him after putting in 3 trannies, oh, well, they're all like this. I doubt that they put any in. Maybe they tried a little reprogramming with a computer or something like that. But we'll start from square one. It is a Korean car, but see inside the door, it was made in Alabama. All right, okay, there's one strike against it. But at the same time, it's 2019, which is a good thing. Because originally when they were making them there, they had problems with the machines. They made the engines wrong, and the engines blew up. They had to replace tons of engines. That's not the case in this car. We'll open the hood, and look, it's got hood support. It's not just one of those dumb little rods. Well, there's a plus. See, it's a GDI engine. We'll take the stupid beauty cover off, throw it away like we always do, so we can see what's going on. Now, this isn't a tiny engine. This is a 2.4 liter 4-cylinder engine. It's got enough horsepower, and as you can see, with the GDI, that's a high pressure fuel pump, it gets good gas mileage. He does get like 38 miles a gallon on the highway. They're made for that. His problem is he doesn't like the way the transmission sometimes shifts a bit funky. Well, we have to get into history for this one. Now, no, it does not have a stupid Nissan Jatco transmission. Hyundai makes almost all their own transmissions now. And this is not a CVT transmission. This is a regular automatic transmission with gears. Like every other modern transmission, you can't check the oil, the dipstick. It's a sealed unit. Transmission makes this whistling sound. Now, it also whines. That was a recording from his phone that he made. Hopefully, it'll make the noise when we take it on a road test, you never know. But they're just saying, oh, that's normal. They normally make it. First thing we're going to do is hook up my fancy scan tool. In this case, It's hiding behind here. There we go. The magic slot machine is doing its thing. Also updating. These things update a lot. That's what I like about these. And here we go. We know what it is. We want diagnosis. And we know it's a US Sonata with GDI. And you see all the stuff we can check. We're going to do a smart scan. It might take a little while, but we're looking for a real needle in a haystack here. The systems, can 1, can 2, can 3. As you can see, everything is either green or gray. It's all green or gray. Gray means it's not equipped, so everything in it is fine. And this messes with all the transmission control modules too. There's a lot of information we can get. Set the adaptation, we can do all kinds of stuff. I'm interested in the transmission control module. So, read the data stream. Now we're going to select them all. And then we're going to record it all on a road test. Here we go on the road test, and we'll see what happens. We're just going to listen to see if we can hear it. So now we got the data. We can play it back. I can look at all the transmission data, and I like graphs, so let's do them graphs. Graphs are much better. You can see the gears. You can see when they shift. Now the data is perfectly fine, but the little noise that we hear, that's it going into 5th gear. And it's made that noise, he said, basically since he got it. And it really hasn't changed all that much, even though now he's got like 50,000 miles on the car. Now, here's the interesting thing. They took it in and they claim 3 times they replaced the transmission, but they said all the internals are new, but the shell is still the same. Well, to me, that's a total scam because they probably worried that he'd get a little engraver or something and somewhere put an X or a notch and say, hey, it's the same transmission. I marked it. And they'll just say, well, your outside shell's the same. The inside's different. Now, they had this thing for 3 months. But at least I do have to give it to the company. They gave him a rental car free. It was one of theirs, new car. He could drive it for 3 months. There's only one problem. If he got any scratches or anything, he was responsible, so he had to be real careful. And he wasn't supposed to drive out of the state of Connecticut, where he's located, so they had to cancel their vacation. Well, that's not too cool, you know. They should have let him go on vacation. Give him another car, give him an older car or something, but whatever. When it came to get it, they said, come back tomorrow, we got to get the paperwork done, blah, blah, blah. The whole time, there was only 15 miles put on the car. Now, it doesn't make this noise when it's cold. It has to be all warmed up. So one, they didn't warm it up all that much. And it was November. When it's colder, it makes more noise when it's warm. Well, use your head. If you got a car that makes a noise like that when it's warmed up, but not until it's warmed up, not when it's cold, there's obviously some type of problem. Granted, it's probably a minor one, but when it warms up, everything is all warmed and seated, and if it makes a noise then, it shows there is wear somewhere that's making that noise when it shifts into 5th gear. And the interesting thing is, if he puts it in sport mode, it never makes the noise. So that tells you that is not normal. The sport mode, of course, makes it stay in RPMs higher, so it has more acceleration, then goes down and lets it go higher. So it obviously has something to do with the pressure that shifts it. This is a regular automatic transmission with regular gears, and they shift by pressure differential. It's the pressure of the fluid that drives the vehicle. So when it's in sport mode, it's going to get higher pressures. It doesn't make the noise. So obviously there's something minor wrong. Like I say, it stayed about the same for them and it works okay. But the fact that they said they changed this automatic transmission 3 times, all the parts inside are new, but the shell's the same. That sounds like total baloney to me. No sense trying to figure the transmission out by looking at it because they admit the shell is still the same shell. So I've had the same thing happen with other customers, and they pretty much gave them the same line of baloney because obviously they're worried that someone's going to mark the transmission and then say, you didn't change my transmission. Then you could actually sue them under the Fraud Act. But, you know, with them saying, well, the shell's the same, but the insides are all different, which you could never prove one way or another. And the fact that they had it for 3 months and they only put 15 miles on it is kind of hilarious. You know, it takes like 12 hours to build the car from scratch. Why would it take 3 months to supposedly fix one? I'm guessing they changed the fluid and filter maybe 2 or 3 times and thought, oh, maybe that'll get rid of that noise that's going through it. But no, it does shift okay. It just makes that funky noise. You buy a new car, you don't want a funky noise. And the hilarious thing is the guy loves the car. It's a beautiful looking car. The paint's held up. It gets 38 miles a gallon on a highway. Everything he wanted works, but that one noise It's driving him crazy. But he's kind of like my age, so he doesn't like really, really loud music. I had a customer in Houston with a BMW. I can't stand that little squeak in the dash. And his friend said, just turn the music up. Just turn the music up, and then you won't hear it. I suggested, if it really drives him nuts, trade it in. Because I guarantee you, with only 45,000 miles, he could get more money than he paid for the car today trading in. But he likes the car, so he's at this quandary of he really wanted a Toyota Camry, and he certainly would trade it in, but he can't find any. There aren't any to buy. But maybe somebody will have one, and they take this as a trade-in. Or I'm going to suggest to him, maybe go to a CarMax or one of those places, Carvana, and say, I'm trading this baby in, I want a Camry, and get a used Camry that's maybe got 40, 50,000 miles on it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.